already any package checkers on. I forgot to.
So here was our application as we left it 3 weeks ago. So it's lesson 8. I could load the home page. I may as well change it so it doesn't say lesson 6 anymore. And we click on the list of teams. Well, things are a little bit, our data's a little bit out of date. Yes, I know, it's sad, Chris, you'll be okay. So this is how we left it. So I'm just gonna go and open up my home page. I may as well change that message that said lesson 6. So I'll just open up my lesson 8 folder. So I'll change my message on the home page. Lesson 8, and we're doing authentication with Passport. It was pointed out to me Thursday what bad form we have by having our floating footer. So we should open up our footer and quickly fix that. It was offending people that our blue footer is halfway up the page instead of at the bottom where it's supposed to be. Lucas was very offended. So in his honor, we'll open up our views and partials. We'll open up the footer. And in here, we can just add another class. In the footer class, we have alert info, which gives it that blue background. We'll just change that to be navbar. We'll add navbar-fix-bottom, which is a Bootstrap class that should anchor the footer to the bottom of the page. So I'll just add that in.
I've been struggling with this for a couple of weeks, and I wasn't sure what class for like Bootstrap is supposed to be. How do you find out these classes? Like if you need to find something.
That's a very good question. The easiest way is go to the Bootstrap site. And if you click on, I think it's components. So for example, if I want to know what classes I have for headers, if you click on header, oh, sorry, that's the page header. So something like a navbar. The documentation's here along with examples. So if I want this navbar, I can just copy that whole sample.
And you can, like, if you don't have samples, you find something.
Yeah, so that would be the other option, is use your browser's inspector. So if I just inspect that element in Chrome, it shows me alert info. Those are the styles. So that's where I can see that blue background color, for example, is part of that class. So use your browser inspector. It will show you what the attributes are of a class that you've used. Okay, does that help, Chris?
I think W3 Schools also covers a lot of Bootstrap stuff. How far is to find the specific thing? Like for footer, I wasn't expecting a navbar. My mind is navbar supposed to be the header, but
yeah, the one thing that it doesn't really have, or at least, and I agree with you, Deepak, it would be useful if it had, is I've yet to see like a full document that defines every class where you can just, it probably exists somewhere. My Google Foo is not so great. Find that where we could look up any class and see the definition.
Well, there's one for Bootstrap 4 that I use, and it's called like hackerthemes.com/bootstrap-cheat sheet, and it's like literally like everything.
Right, but that's for Bootstrap 4, right? Which is still in beta. But
It's kind of like what you're talking
we want the Bootstrap 3 cheat sheet. Kenzie, you know where to find it?
There's one if you go to Bootstrap and it just shows, it's not like all classes and everything, but it shows like every tool you put in Bootstrap, and if you inspect element, you can see all the classes that they use, but it's not like its exact definition of their classes.
Right. But I mean, really, we should.
If you Google Bootstrap 3 cheat sheet.
Yeah,
She just.
I just did.
I'm sorry.
Great minds think alike, I guess. What can I say? So here, Deepak, that's not bad because it actually shows you an example of each class element. That's really what we need. They really should have this on their own site. They haven't really done a full documentation of all of their objects, which is kind of lousy. They're going to give you the classes. They should give us a definition so we know how to use them. They've given us some examples, but they haven't documented every single one. Okay. So our footer's anchored at the bottom now. I just used that navbar fix bottom to push it down to the bottom. I'm sure Lucas would be very proud.
Can you show me code for a second?
So I've added navbar fixed bottom. So I'm going to stop the application because we need to start installing some of the modules that Passport's going to use. Okay, so all I did was add that second class on line 7. So I'll stop my application. We need to install 5 packages. Now we can do it with 5 separate npm install commands, or you can actually do it all in one. And we just separate the package names with a space. If you're on Blackboard, I've given you the code, so you don't need to type it. We need these 5 packages. The original Passport package, Passport local. What Passport local means is we're authenticating, as it said in the documentation, there's different strategies. So using Facebook or Twitter or Google, those are all considered different strategies. Passport local means we're authenticating with our own store of username and passwords in our database. So we need to install that. Passport local mongoose should probably be self-explanatory. Local user account with MongoDB. So mongoose is going to be the interface for that. What about the last 2? Express session and connect flash. What do you suppose those packages do and why would we need them?
That's for encrypting, decrypting, when you want to store the user session variable when you go from page to page.
So for express session, yes. In order to know who that user is as they move from page to page, we need to store them. Passport's going to store them in a session object. We did that in PHP. We just did it manually. So there's an NPM package for putting data into the session, reading data out. What about connect flash? Any idea what that refers to? Why we use that? It's related to sessions, but it has a bit of a different purpose from storing the users.
Is that because some time limit for the session? Maybe 5 minutes, the session just be.
Really good guess. It's actually not related to that. It's related to some kind of output. Good guess though, Bison. Flash is used, Justin, you have an idea?
I just looked it up.
Well, that's always a good way to find an answer. Look it up.
It's just like a middleware, so it lets the user know, like, if they're logged, like, it gives them a message and then it goes away.
It's a way of displaying messages and also putting those message in session variables so we can generate them on one page but display them on another page if we want to redirect the user. So we may or may not really use Connect Flash. Probably a good idea to install it. So for example, we can show somebody that they haven't been logged in, for example. So I'm just going to install these all in one command, and I'll use --save to add them all to package.json. So I'll just run npm install passport And then I'll put in a space, install passport local, a space, passport dash local dash mongoose, a space, press dash session, and connect dash flash, minus save. So we'll install all 5 of these packages at once. It's probably going to take a little while to download and install them all, especially passport. And we'll use the minus save option so they're added to package.json.
Have you tried out Yarn?
Sorry?
Have you tried out Yarn?
No, I haven't.
It's pretty new. It's by Facebook. It's like you install it through NPM and it replaces NPM entirely, and it's like
It's supposed to be like a new package manager to take over NPM because it's supposed to offer like offline capabilities, so you won't have to always be on the network.
so it caches, and it's also more flat than NPM. So it's more of a flat dependency hierarchy.
Yeah, there's no-
Well, the last couple weeks of the class of our course, remember there's no final exam. Each of you is going to be part of a group where you have an hour to teach some new topic to the class. So that might be one that we might add to that list. Do a demo on Yarn and get it working for the class. So I'm going to install all these packages. Again, the names are here on Blackboard if you want to just copy and paste them. So it'll take a minute to install all this stuff. Actually, faster than I thought. Not too many sub-dependencies. Express Session has a few. But that's about it. So we're going to need a couple of new views, which I've saved you the trouble of typing out. They're just standard HTML with a bit of Bootstrap for formatting. So I've created a register view and a login view. Didn't want to take up class time typing all these out. So steal my code. So copy all the code in register.ejs, paste it into a new view. Inside of views, call it register.ejs, and then do the same thing for login. So I'll just copy everything here. It's got our header and footer. And do the same thing with login. So they're almost identical forms, except the register page has a password and a confirm password box. The login just has username and password. We also should add some links in our navigation bar. So there's a register link in the nav bar as well as a login link. Right now we only have 2 links. So once you've copied and pasted the code and created these 2 files, let's open up the partials, header.ejs. We have 2 links here. We're actually going to add 3 links. We should add register, login, and log out. We don't actually need a view for log out because there's no page that actually has to load in the browser. We're just going to log the user out and redirect them. Our first link will go to /register. Our second link goes to /logout. Our third link, sorry, second link goes to /login. Third one goes to /logout. So we now should have 5 links at the top of a page when if we restart our application. Later on, we'll change this. What we'll want to do when the users, much like we did in our PHP application, when the user first comes to the site, if they're not logged in, we're going to hide the Teams link and hide the logout link, because we want those pages should be private, and register and log in will be visible. Once they've logged in, we'll hide register and log in, and we'll show Teams and log out instead. So we'll leave them here for now. We'll add some code on here. First, we've got to get our whole authentication system working, and we can kind of add that at the end. Any questions so far? Anybody behind, confused? We okay? Now, what will happen if I go to the register page and click, if I click the register link in my nav bar now, what's going to happen? Why will nothing happen, Bison? Right. Well, it's not exactly nothing. We get a 404 not found, right? Our application doesn't know yet how to interpret that URL. And same with login, we're going to get the same thing. So in our index.js, let's set up 2 basic routes, one to load the register view and one to load the login view. So that'll get rid of the 404 errors. So we can open up routes in index.js. But both of these are forms, so we're going to need 2 route handlers. First, we'll need get to load the form, and then we'll need to write post handlers for what happens when the user submits each form, when they're creating an account on the register page or when they're trying to sign in on the login page. When we have a GET request that /register, we'll load the register page. We'll set a title. Of register. We'll do the exact same thing on our login page. And that should fix those 404 errors that we get. I'll just copy that. The NodeMon will restart for us, which is good. And now if you try, click those 2 links in your header, you should get your 2 forms. George, question? Or you just have an itchy beard?
I have a question about like you know how you're using index teams and user.js, would you sort of like, can you break that down further? Like, let's say you have like a DPI folder with different JS files for routing, and you also have like a, let's say, an app folder for different indexing.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we could, if we wanted to, we could handle these through, I think in the tutorial link that I've put up here, he doesn't use index.js. He actually creates these, the register and login. Oh no, sorry, he does do it here. In some of them, you'll see somebody creating a separate controller called maybe auth. And they'll put all the code in there, all the code related to authentication. So we could do it that way. Absolutely. So I'm going to kind of keep it in index.js. The reason I'm doing it is because these pages are basically still public pages in the root of the site. So that's why I'm choosing to use index.js. But certainly nothing wrong if from a kind of an organization perspective, you like the idea of putting this stuff, because it has to do with authentication, in its own controller. For sure, you could do that. In fact, last time I taught the course, that was how I did it. So now if I click register, we get our form. If we click login, we get our login form. Right? They're not going to do anything if I submit the forms. We now get a not found. Why? Why does it load? And then why does it crash as soon as I submit it? It's trying to load the same page.
What did you do?
I click the login button. So when I click the login link, our page loads. Yet when I actually try to log in and hit the button, it's going to the same address, but now we have not found. Why? Right, because the first time it loads, it's using get. And we've told our application what to do with the get request. But when the user clicks the button, it's doing a post request, and our application doesn't know what to do yet. Before we can really write these post requests, now we need to configure Passport. Because when the user submits the registration form or submits the login form, we need Passport to handle the registration and login for us. So we have a bunch of configuring to do. So we're going to configure 3 separate places. Most of our configuration is going to be in app.js. We're going to need, part of it is we're going to need a secret key, which we could put in app.js, but Justin, I like your suggestion. Let's put it in our global file instead. And then the other thing we're going to need is we're going to need a model. We're going to need an account model that defines what a user account looks like. Okay, and then Passport will kind of do the rest. Takes care of like hashing passwords, all that stuff. We don't have to do anything. It's all baked right into Passport, which is cool. So let's open up our app.js. So almost everything here, 95% of this came with the Express generator. We didn't write. I think we only added a couple lines here. We added our Teams controller and mapped the requests, and we added our database connection. So I think we've added like 5 lines to this file, and we linked to Mongoose as well. So now we need to add a whole bunch of other dependencies for using Passport. So I'll maybe put our section maybe here after our database configuration. We're going to configure Passport. We're going to require the Express session package we installed. We're going to require Passport. And we're going to create a variable for the strategy. So meaning when we're using Passport, what type of Passport authentication are we using? We're using Passport local, meaning we're going to have the usernames and passwords in our own database. But this is a little bit of a different require statement. We're requiring Passport local, but in here, we're creating an object of type strategy. It's not the whole library we're requiring. We're requiring a class inside of that library, the strategy class. We're instantiating an instance of that. And in case we want to use flash messages, we'll require that one too. So those are all our dependency links that let our application use Passport. First part is to add the dependencies. And then down here, we'll say app.use flash module. So we may or may not use this, but this allows us to store messages in the session object and display them, pass them from one page to another. So now we need to enable sessions because we're going to use the session object to store information about our users when they log in. So we're going to use the express session. I did miss a bracket. Thank you. 2 round brackets at the end. We're going to put in a secret here. Now we could hard code it in here, but instead we'll put a variable in our config file. Okay. So we already are referencing our config file up here on line 19. Haven't created a variable in there called secret yet. We'll do that in a minute. Right now, that value would return a null. We want the ability to resave our sessions. And we're going to set that setting of save uninitialized as false. Just a bit of kind of session plumbing. Now we are going to initialize Passport. As well as passport.session. This is kind of generic Passport code. Any application we want to use Passport for, we're going to need to initialize it in this way. You with me? Test later. Pass or you're making dinner. Now we'll need to do a little more setup here. We need to also add functions to serialize and deserialize the user. So basically to take someone that logs in and copy their identity into a session. So as they move around, we know who they are, or to read their identity out of a session. Because maybe we want to check like their roles and permissions. Does this user have access to this resource? We should probably deal with the secret because right now our secret's going to be empty. So let's open up our config page, our config folder, and our global variables. We already have a key here for our database. Let's add one called secret. Secret can be any string, so it just has to be in single quotes. So just put in any string that you like as your secret. Doesn't have to be the same as mine. So when we initialize passport, it's going to read this secret value, which will be used to help salt values. So just put in a comma after that DB line.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is there any difference between you put a single condition in the secret and without the single condition? I just noticed that you sometimes put a single condition in secret.
Oh, around the word secret? You don't need it. It's optional. I could do this. Yes, I could. Both are correct. Typically, we don't need the single quotes around the key names, only around the values if they're strings. So it's fine if you put it in. It's not wrong. It won't break anything, but it isn't really necessary. By convention, usually when we look at these JSON arrays, we won't usually see single quotes around the keys. So for example, look at this example, right? We don't usually see them. If you put them in, it's fine, but we typically won't.
Could you show app.js for a second?
Yep. And unfortunately, we're not done with app.js. We have a couple more passport functions that still need to go in here, in addition to what we've already done. I'd like to be able to kind of run it one step at a time, but we really can't. We have to configure it entirely or it's not going to work at all. Ideally, we could do one line, see what happens, do the next line. Can't really do that with configuring the module. Account model, which we will build. If you haven't built it yet, we'll build it shortly. We'll create a model that will be simple. It'll have two properties, a username and a password. So we're going to need to link that model in. So what we're doing here by calling account.createStrategy, we're telling Passport, account is the model to use for managing user accounts. So when we're creating our local strategy, it's through the account model. That's what's going to generate usernames and passwords in our MongoDB. Logan?
As of right now, currently the app.use doesn't work. It means that the cannot be properly used. Flash IDs.
So here,
Yeah, it doesn't. Oh.
do you have the brackets after it? It's actually it's actually a constructor. You have the brackets? Down? If it causes an issue, we can disable it for now. So the last thing we need to do is make 2 function calls after line 41 to serialize the user and deserialize the user with Passport. Serialize is basically taking an object in one form or stored in one place and translating it to another. So I'll write the function and we'll look at it. But Deepak, let me explain what's happening here. When our account model gets a user from the database, calling passport.serializeUser, it means take that user account and store it in the session. Pardon?
That should after the account variable, right? Number 39 should after number 40 and 42.
Good point. I put in the wrong place. Thank you. So then we'll do the opposite as well. We'll deserialize the user. So read the user out of the session if, let's say, we want to check something in the database about maybe that user's permissions. So we use deserialize, just the opposite. Does that comment help on 43? So we're basically connecting up a user account that we get from our database with our session object, either moving that user into the session or reading that user out of the session so we can look at something about that user account in the database.
So this is basically just the same thing we did in PHP, like the session start.
Yeah, actually, that's a good way of thinking about it. Except instead of using just the session directly, we're using Passport to talk to the session. Because Passport will do things like encrypt those values, so if that traffic's intercepted, somebody can't read them. Okay, so Passport's kind of our middleware doing it for us. But very much it's like sessions, calling session start, in a way. You could think of it that way. So I think, so there's a fair bit of configuration here. That's the bad news. The good news is this really isn't going to change very much from one application to another. Most of what we have here we can use to add authentication to any application. That'll be part of what you have to do for assignment 2 is build an application that's basically private, where there'll be a public homepage, register login, and everything else a user will have to log in to see.
For deserialize, is this a camel case? 45. Line 45.
Yeah, all the functions are camel case. So the first word is all lowercase, and the second word starts with a capital. They are camel case. I will see if I've broken anything. Yes, we have broken something because it's looking for a model called account that doesn't yet exist. Right? So if we're getting this error, that's okay. So that's got to be the next thing we need to do is build a simple model file called account. So let's go and create that file. So inside our models right now, we have just one model, which is our team model. We'll create another JS file. We'll call it account. .js. So we're going to want to do similar things we did here. So let's link to Mongoose. And we'll define a new schema. This is what a user looks like. We'll keep it simple. All we really need to define is username and password. If we wanted other things in our user, we could add other things like email, user role, things like that. We can just put on a message, making sure that they can't sign up with an empty username. Oops. I will do the same for password. And when we did this in PHP, we had to worry about hashing the password, making sure our database had 128 characters to hold it. We don't have to worry about that stuff. Passport will just take care of it. It automates all this stuff. It will salt and hash the passwords for us. And one of the other neat things is rather than using the same salt value for each one, it will use our secret to generate a unique salt value every time, which makes it much harder to hack the passwords because there's using a random salt and a hash. And then we'll make this public. It's a very simple user schema we're defining here. This should fix our error. NodeMon restarts. I think I missed something in my model. Let's just compare it. Take out the word new here. There is a couple things we need to add in here.
That where we, like, they were saying in the video that you just kind of use the account class that they provide, and it already like uses a username and password. You just have to add in like with all your additional properties?
We still need a model, but what we haven't done is this is a different kind of model. We need to actually attach it to this is where we use that passport local mongoose. So I need a reference to that here, and we need a couple of commands in here. So I'll create a variable called PLM, and we'll require passport-local-mongoose. What I'm going to call is the plugin function. So we're basically telling Passport in two places, this is the model that's handling the Passport local authentication. The user management is done in this model. It's not a typical model like our Teams model. So we have to link to Passport local mongoose and plug it in. Oh, whoops, sorry, this should be account schema. Sorry about that. Somehow, I think we're going to have to make one other change in app.js. Let me try one more thing here.
I think in app.js, your account, like you define account after you try to call serialize one. No, that's how.
No, it's linked here.
What's your error?
No, I did. It did restart.
What does it say? Cannot read property of the matter?
So something is undefined. It's trying to use Passport.
Go to your model. Account.js. You didn't use. I think you need to have.
We'll figure it out. All right. Well, this is maybe a good place for us to take a pause. Me to hack through my code. We've actually done most of the heavy lifting. Once we get it configured, there's really just, we just need to write the post handlers.
It's a lowercase.
Right, it is a lowercase. Good catch. Let's see. Okay. We're getting somewhere, although, oh, and I've spelled serialize wrong. Serialize. Ah, lo and behold. Okay, so our application runs. That's good. So it's all set up now. We've configured Passport to do everything we need. Now we just need to write the code. So we basically need to do 4 things the second part of class. We need to write a post handler for register so we can create an account. We need to write a post handler for login, so after creating an account, we can actually log in. We need to add a security check on the team's views so that someone can't get into these pages if they haven't registered and logged in. And the last thing we're going to do is put an if statement in our nav bar so that we show certain links when the user's logged in and show other links when they're anonymous. Okay. I'm going to leave this code up. That's pretty much everything we've added to app.js is right here. Okay, let's take 20 minutes. We'll come back at 12:35.
Sorry, what did you do?